Welcome back to the TCM Teach Podcast, the business podcast designed exclusively for acupuncturists and Chinese medicine herbalists who are ready to build thriving, sustainable practices. I'm Sabey Smith, licensed acupuncturist, herbalist, professor, coach, and entrepreneur. Over the years, I've helped practitioners not only refine their clinical skills, but also communicate the heart of what they do in a way that resonates deeply with patients. So today we're diving into one of the most powerful yet often overlooked skills for practitioners, and that is storytelling. Specifically, how to explain what you do in a way that feels natural, engaging, and clear. How do you do that even for someone who knows nothing about acupuncture or Chinese medicine? Let's be honest. If you've ever stumbled over how to answer the question, so what exactly do you do? You're not alone. This episode will give you the tools and strategies to share your work with confidence and authenticity. This is basically a continuation of the previous episode. We're going to dive into those concepts further. But first, quick disclaimer. Please remember, I am simply a practitioner here to support you on your journey. The information shared in this podcast is intended for educational and learning purposes only, and it should be not taken as professional, legal, or financial advice. For specific guidance to your business, please consult the appropriate licensed professional. Thank you. So, why storytelling matters in a healing business? Stories create connection. Facts inform people, but it's really stories that are going to inspire the trust, the buy-in. You've heard me talk about the emotional buy-in previously. Patients often don't understand acupuncture terminology. And I say this to students a lot and different coaching clients that I've had. Understand acupuncture jargon for yourself. Patients don't necessarily have to know unless they overtly ask you, what is qi? What's your answer going to be for that? To a Westerner, they understand what patients understand is transformation, and they understand personal experience. Let me give you an example that I actually had a few hours ago today. I was in the gym and I was in my squat day doing heavy squats, and someone was talking about the difference between homeopathy and naturopathy. And so I chimed in like, oh yeah, well, homeopathy is its own thing. It has its own materia medica. There's naturopathy. And I explained a lot of people actually mess me up they mistake me as a homeopath. I'm an acupuncturist. It happens all the time. And they're like, really? Wow. So instantly I listened to them. I heard what they had to say. And then I was like, have you heard of acupuncture? So what that did was it changed it broke the ice. It was someone I hadn't talked to before. And then another person in the gym heard us talking about acupuncture. And I wasn't pushing business or anything. I was just busy doing my own thing. And someone else in the gym came over. Hey, you guys talking about acupuncture? And yeah, he's an acupuncturist. Oh, cool. I had acupuncture. And then they went into their whole story, how they had this cough. And they had this really bad cough for years, and they just gave up on it. And they had really bad elbow pain. And so they went to the acupuncturist, and they didn't tell the acupuncturist about the cough. They kept getting their elbow pain worked on. And then they said several sessions went by, and then he said, I have to tell you, as if he was talking to the acupuncturist, I have to tell you, you've been working on my elbow, but this cough that I've had for years that they told me just to live with, that the doctors told him just to live with, it's gone. And he said, I'm actually going to acupuncture this afternoon because my cough kind of came back a little bit, and I know that's going to fix it. I don't know why. Apparently it's connected. The acupuncturist said the elbow could kind of help with the cough or something. And I said, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so I didn't even have to do talking about the acupuncture. And instantly, the person who was curious about acupuncture the walls were broken down. They heard the stories. They were like, can I have your card? Sometimes the opening the door leads to all kinds of other connections, stories to be told. So sometimes you don't even have to be telling your own story. It could be someone else's story that ultimately leads into you getting that lead, getting that client to come into your office. So that's pretty sweet. That's pretty fun. That's a really great way to leverage community in anywhere you are. Like I've said, I always get people in the door just when I hang out in the gym because I like working with active people. So patients often don't understand the acupuncture jargon, like I was mentioning. In that conversation, I didn't use any acupuncture jargon. One of the person who was asking me about acupuncture, they were like, yeah, I heard it's like this energy and stuff. I was like, yeah, they call it chi. Yeah. Yep. So I actually didn't have to say much, and they were the ones that kept talking. And they were like, oh, but I'm really afraid of needles. And I'm like, hey, I used to be really afraid of needles too, actually. Trust me, I actually used to faint at the sight of a needle, but then I got hit with a baseball right over here on my eyebrow, and you could see where I have a scar. And ever since then, I had to get stitches, and I got a needle here and a needle here so they would numb it. I wasn't afraid of needles since then, but maybe it would help you to know that an acupuncture needle is 140 times thinner than a medical syringe. Maybe that would make you feel better than usually what you get like a vaccination for or whatever. So, which opened up a whole nother can of worms, which was completely fine. It was like, yeah, cool. No, all good. But the idea here is it's just opening the door and having comfortable conversation in a common area where I'm just hanging out where people who like to work with me hang out. So remember the storytelling here, even though not all the stories are my own, the storytelling is the gap between ancient medicine and modern understanding. You're a professional translator for people in the West. You're a professional translator. How does acupuncture work? Well, come up with your response quickly and to the point. No pun intended, of course. So key takeaways here are when patients understand your story, they understand why they can trust you. In that example, even if the other person didn't come tell their story about acupuncture in the gym today, I went and said, oh, I completely get it. I actually really resonate with that. I used to pass out at the sight of a needle. So I very much understand. And it's not the same. It's not the same. And then I just got backup when another person comes in to tell their story and they're like, oh, the needles don't hurt. They don't hurt at all. So you never know. But that's legitimately an example that happened to me a few hours ago today. That happens all the time. So the struggle with explaining acupuncture. As soon as you go down the route of chi and energy, it can get complicated. Anything that talks about energy and chi can confuse people. Unless your audience wants to hear about energy. If you're like an esoteric acupuncturist or you're an energy worker, they would like to hear that. But not everyone does, so you have to speak to your audience. Falling back on jargon can distance you from your listener. If I were giving you this information, giving you this podcast, and all of a sudden I start talking about sports statistics and how I decide to change the whole brand, everything is just sports statistics podcast, I'm not speaking to anyone in my audience now. No one here, maybe you care about Chinese medicine and sports statistics, but I have a feeling a lot of you are not into both. So my point is you don't want to change your brand like we had talked about in the previous episode, and you want to be very careful that you stick to your relatable entry points. Because ultimately patients don't want a lecture. They want they want something predictable. They want to know what to expect, and they want to move forward. So instead of saying I regulate chi flow through meridians, I help people who feel stuck from stress or looking for a healthier life or find balance and relief. Focus on the transformation is what I'm trying to say. You can get into the nitty gritty of chi and the 8 principles if you want, but it's going to be complicated and people are going to start giving you a blank stare and start looking sideways and kind of just be blinking for a while, pretending they understand, but generally they really don't. So Well, so how does acupuncture work? Okay, well, what I would do in this scenario, I would focus on what's bothering them. For example, the rock climber. I had a rock climber example, I think, in my last episode where there was a rock climber who was at the gym I used to climb at, and I got to know them well, and they had a tendon pull. Tendon pulls are very common in rock climbers, and they had a tendon pull, and they couldn't really work for like 4 months. They couldn't pull on it because their tendon hurt so much. Very common in rock climbers. I said, I think I can work on that. Why don't you just come see me? I'm a rock climber. I get it. I know what you're talking about. I got them better in 3 sessions. What I did not do is talk acupuncture jargon. I said, yeah, basically, we're just going to try and increase the nutrient and blood flow in that area, help it heal faster, basically tell the brain and communicate to the brain that this area needs to be healed. And then I'll give you some herbs topically for it to really reduce the inflammation. And maybe sometimes I'll talk about inflammation as heat sometimes and just kind of calm it down, get rid of the pain a little bit, and then we'll get you feeling better. I got them better in 3 sessions and I got their job back because they weren't making any progress whatsoever. So instead of focusing on how acupuncture works, focus on the transformation that they're going to get. That'll fix it every time. And then if you have someone overtly ask you, what is qi? Then you can handle that conversation however you wish. Well, before I get into talking about qi, can you just tell me what's going on? And then I can try and relate it to make it make more sense. That's fine. There was a quote that I like to use from Spark in the Machine. That's a cool book. If you haven't read that book, Spark in the Machine. And it talks about how electrical impulses are sent across fascial planes. And there's this space between the fascia, and that's how acupuncture can communicate. I have never had anyone question my response when they say, well, what are the meridians? What is qi? It's basically like communicating your brain and fascial planes together to send electrical impulses to tell your brain where to work. It sounds confident, it sounds straightforward, and I'm not lying, So just find the really quick response to these simple things. What is qi? Well, first tell me what's going on. Let me better understand you. Tell me about you. Because ultimately, how can you get them balance and relief? That's what they care about. That's what they want. So you want to craft your origin story. Okay, so share the why behind your journey into TCM. Do you remember in the last episode when I talked about how I got into TCM, things that inspired me? What inspired you? So what you can break this down into is the before, the turning point, and the now. Okay, so I'm breaking down the story from the previous episode as well. Before, who were you and what did you experience? Before, I was just a guy who grew up in the Northeast in the United States. I was surrounded by biomed. I was just told that's what you do. And that's all I believed there was access to. I thought herbs were cool. I kind of dove into supplements and vitamins and hoped they worked and self-medicating with supplements all the time. And then it ended up half of those things didn't do anything anyway. But I was curious, well, what's deeper than that? I saw my wife get a traumatic brain injury skiing. That was me before. It was the turning point. I was drawn to TCM because I saw my wife's healing take place. And then I saw my healing take place. And I was like, wow, there must be some legitimacy to this. This has been around for how many years? And then the now. How you help others through this medicine. I tell my story all the time. I actually used to be a chronic asthmatic. I felt horrible all the time. It was ruining my life. Now it's very rare I even have to touch an inhaler or take any medication whatsoever. And I was told, this is my previous life, I was told that I would just have to take medication for my whole life, all this stuff, all these medications. And now I don't have to take any of them. Maybe on a very extreme, rare occasion, a rescue inhaler for a really bad asthma attack that I didn't see coming. And that's maybe once a year, if that. So, what do you want to do? You want to keep it short, 2 to 3 sentences for casual use. And you can keep it longer for your website or talks, but if you can get to the point, you can stick to your branding, you can stick to your core values, you are going to have such better ways to get your origin story across quickly. So your origin story is the most powerful tool for connection. How do you hook people? How do you talk to them? How do you get them to tell you about what they're dealing with so you can say, I have the solution, which generally you probably do. Okay, so explaining what you do without confusing people. You want to use everyday language or language that they will understand. I'm not just talking about speaking English. I'm talking about avoiding TCM jargon if they don't know anything about TCM. If they want to dive deeper, great. Paint a picture. Imagine ... or it's like ... metaphors. When you get a needle, it's like getting a mosquito bite. Some people like that response. They're like, oh, that's pretty straightforward. It can itch a little, maybe not at all. Some people don't even feel it. That's comforting to people who have a fear of needles. Well, what do the needles do? Okay, what's my answer for that? The needles essentially act like, when there's a traffic jam and then we need a traffic cop to break it up and then the traffic starts flowing smoothly again. That's like pain. And when the traffic cops, like the acupuncture needles, come in, then the pain starts dissipating because the traffic is flowing smoothly again. That's a metaphor example. So you speak to results, what patients gain, not just what you do. People ultimately don't care about what you do. They just want to hear the transformation you're going to give them and how you're going to get them feeling more comfortable and out of pain. So here's a formula for clarity. I help ideal patient who struggles with what is their problem by using what's your approach, acupuncture, herbs, whatever, so they can, what is the resultant transformation? Pretty straightforward. So if I were to talk this out, let me see what I could say off the top of my head here. I help athletes who struggle with chronic overuse injuries by using acupuncture and herbal medicine so they can get back on the field faster and perform better than before. You could literally use that formula and it'll give you a straightforward answer for whatever question someone might ask you. Storytelling through patient results. So share success stories. Just don't break confidentiality. The last thing you want is a HIPAA issue. We've talked about HIPAA in previous episodes. Just make sure you share your success story, but keep the identity out of it. That can be really great. Or if ultimately someone else shares their success story, like what happened to me today, I didn't even have to provoke that at all. They just said it on their own. So you want to frame them as case studies. A patient came in struggling with X. After a certain amount of treatments, they were able to do whatever. So, okay, for the rock climber I was talking about, a patient came in struggling with a tendon pull from rock climbing. They were out of work for 4 months because they were a setter at a gym and they couldn't set. After 3 treatments, they were able to rock climb without hesitation again. They were able to perform better than before. These stories become social proof and word of mouth fuel. This is going to fuel all those stories. This is going to really get people talking. So the key takeaway here is going to be that every patient's story is an opportunity to show the medicine's impact. Well, I want to see, you might run into people who say, I want to see the research. It's like, yes, it's hard to fit all of TCM into the scientific method alone. It's possible in some cases, but there's always going to be something missing because it's a holistic medicine. We know a point like stomach 36 can do many different things, or pericardium 6 does not just treat nausea, but there might be a study on pericardium 6 treating nausea. So there's always going to be something missing. It's very hard to always fit TCM within the scientific method and a deduction type system. However, patient stories, word of mouth creates impact. Well, this person got better and I trust them, so I'm going to give it a shot, even if I have no idea how it works. So, what is the idea here with storytelling? And how do we relate that to TCM? You've heard me focusing on the Shen. So the Shen is going to shine through expression. We know that it shines through the eyes in TCM. So storytelling is like communicating your Shen to the community. It's what people connect with. Just as we harmonize the body, we harmonize language to help others feel what we do not just hear about it. We want to ultimately get people on our clinic table to make them feel better. If we can get other people talking about that too, and it relates back to our core values and our core mission and our vision, and we're doing all the really cool stuff, and our clinic shows that, our marketing shows that, our words show that, our actions show that, you're going to be set up for really great success, and it's going to be super awesome. So, practical storytelling exercises that you can think about here. Write your 3-sentence origin story. What is your origin story in 3 sentences? Practice your elevator pitch until it feels natural. We talked about the elevator pitch in the previous episode, so if you missed that, go back there. Then collect 2 to 3 patient success stories. Just make sure you leave their identifiable information out, their name, etc. And share at networking events, social media, talks, however, wherever you market, whenever the conversation comes up, think of 2 to 3 really great success stories. I even talked about one today in that same interaction I had at the gym. Oh yeah, some people focus on, another person came into the conversation because their wife ended up having success with fertility because they had 2 miscarriages, and then they saw an acupuncturist, and then they were able to have a kid as a result. And then I said, yeah, some people end up having success with fertility. I actually have a case where I helped with a induction for my friend, and I worked with the MD, and baby came out right on time. It was perfect. So these conversations are organic. It's very easy. You just have to talk to people. And then record yourself answering. What do you do? Refine it until it feels authentic and simple. It might seem a little corny to record yourself, but you have to practice somehow. Otherwise, you could practice with other people, in front of other people, and say, ask for feedback, but it comes with time. Just keep practicing, keep practicing, keep practicing. So with that said, I want to leave you with this. Storytelling is not about selling. You're just sharing. You're sharing your shen, basically. You're sharing the shen of your business. When you communicate with clarity, authenticity, patients don't just hear what you do. They feel why it ultimately matters. So I've created a resource called the Storytelling Guide. This is going to walk you through step-by-step creating your story, using your voice, and communication pathways to help you connect to future clients. So you're going to find that in the membership. And in our next episode, we'll be diving into how to market acupuncture without sounding woo-woo. Until then, thanks for tuning in to the TCM Teach Podcast, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.